folks who are here, I invited Misha. She's a longtime friend from way, way, way back, and she has been at Oracle for quite a period of time, and she's done exceptionally well out at Oracle. And I just thought it would be interesting to talk to somebody in what I call real industry about how real industry sort of works, how you get there, and stuff like that. So I have a number of questions. Okay, so Misha's here, and what I'm going to start with is just a simple question of Misha, what is your educational background?
Before we get into that, give me just a quick background on who all you have on the call. Do you have folks, are they from design backgrounds, user experience backgrounds, or more general IT? I just want to get a feel for the flavor of the audience.
Okay, I would say they're more general IT, the folks that are here right now.
Okay, got it. Development, product
Okay,
management,
wait,
any
Misha,
particular?
Misha, let me
Mm-hmm.
hold for just a minute. The people that are here right now are general IT, but this will be shared with students, and they're going to have a whole range from general IT to design to usability and
Okay,
everything in between.
got it. Okay, that's very helpful. Okay, can you ask your question again, please?
Oh, okay. Who was your kindergarten teacher? What is your educational background?
I have 3 degrees. My first degree is an undergraduate degree in radio, television, and film, Bachelor of Arts from the University of Texas at Austin. My second degree is a master's in telecommunications from Master of Arts from Indiana University. And my third and final degree is a PhD uh, in information science, also from Indiana University, but from another department, from the School of Informatics.
So, in informatics, what did you focus on at informatics?
I focused on human-computer interaction and cognitive psychology.
Okay. So now, often when people go and get PhDs, they go into academia, then maybe go into industry. Now, you didn't go into academia; you went directly into industry. So, how did you make that jump?
Well, it was actually a pretty difficult jump to make because in my mind, I come from a family of teachers. I had always expected to continue to be a teacher, and I really hadn't actually anticipated moving into industry until I took your game design class. And that was the first time I realized that there was actually a way to translate what I knew how to do and what I loved doing into something that actually could be a career within industry. And the other sort of aha that I had was once I understood that was possible, I understood the opportunity to have an impact on everyday lives. When I saw what software design, software development, how much of an impact you could have, whether it was a corporate application, which is where I work with Oracle. We design software for businesses, or a consumer application, just the opportunity to have an impact and improve someone's life in a material way. That was truly eye-opening for me, and that was actually what sparked it and opened the door. Once I figured out that that's actually what I wanted to do, it was a simple matter of actually just walking over to the employment center at the university and saying, so I'm this kind of person. I'm an academic by training, and here are all my fantastic academic credentials that will provide absolutely no value whatsoever when I try to apply for a job in industry. Can you help me, please? Because I need to learn how to speak business, and I do not know how, and I have no training in that. And so they work with me to help me figure out how to translate what I knew how to do and what I knew how to say. And believe it or not, I relied an enormous amount on my experience in your game design class to figure out how to translate what I knew how to do, what I loved doing, into something that would make sense from a business perspective.
So, how did you apply at a range of places, or how did you get to Oracle particularly?
Interesting question. So, kind of in between, I had this idea that I wanted to work for myself. So, for a period of time, I ran my own company before I actually got into corporate. This was actually while I was still in school as an independent consultant doing work for telcos, so telecommunications companies. So, at the time, telephone companies, if you remember what those are. So, I did some independent work for Siemens. I did some independent work for AT&T and NCR, and it drew from my knowledge of telecommunications coming out of the master's program at IU, Indiana University. And I tried running my own business and organizing my own projects and working with my own team. I really enjoyed the work, but what I discovered was that I spent 50% of my time running the business side, so not actually getting to do the work. So talking to accountants, organizing projects, getting payroll sorted out, dealing with legal. And I got to spend about 1 day a week actually doing the work that I loved, 2 days a week overseeing other people's work, somewhere in there trying to get a good night's sleep, and then thinking about the next project. That was a tough road to be self-employed that way and to run a consultancy that way. And when I had an opportunity to travel a little bit and see some other companies and see what the lifestyle could be like, what I decided then was what I really wanted to do was work for a company that had a lot of resources where I could really focus on doing the things that I loved. I did not enjoy um, being a CPA. I did not enjoy writing legal documents. I did not enjoy managing payroll or dealing with HR. And so I really wanted to find a place that I could do that. And so I shopped around and I found Oracle.
So, what was your starting role at Oracle?
I was originally what's called a usability engineer.
So, what does that mean?
So that is a person whose job is basically to talk to people and to understand how they see the world and then to figure out how to translate that into software design. So it's not quite the design side because the design side would typically come with someone who's well trained in product design and product experience. Usability engineer is trained in listening. We're sort of therapists for the software world. We sit down with people. We are trained in understanding how to ask questions in a neutral way. We're trained in understanding how to elicit requirements that a product designer can actually use to translate into something that actually would help a person's daily life. We're trained in running things like focus groups, large group, or individual one-on-one interviews, things that are called field studies, where you actually go out and you observe how people work in their actual job day to day, whether it's following them in a cab, following them at work, following them on a shop floor, if they work in a manufacturing center, and using all those different kinds of research methodologies to collect, aggregate, synthesize, and boil that down into requirements that a designer can use to understand how to actually build software against that.
Hmm. So now you're not a user engineer today, right?
That is correct. I have not been for a long time.
So now what do you do today for your day to day?
Well, today I'm in a very, very different place. I'm fortunate in that working for a large company, one of the benefits has been that I had the opportunity to actually change careers several times without having to actually change companies. So I was able to keep the organizational history, the organizational knowledge that I'd gained from staying with the same employer and transition into different roles. And what I do now is I am a chief storyteller for Oracle. I am the director of communications and outreach for our applications user experiences. That means I get to go talk to customers, talk to partners, talk to students, talk to salespeople, talk to industry analysts about how Oracle invests in what we do, why we spend millions of dollars investing in this space, but then also explaining how it translates into a business value. So helping customers understand not just that we do it, but that how it actually improves their working world, how it makes their lives better.
So how similar is what you do now to what is often called scenario-based design?
Very good question. It really depends on if I was actually thinking about detailed product design. I would say we actually use both when we look at how product design actually happens at Oracle. So designers today are going to use a compilation of methods, and I would say more and more what I see in the industry as someone who's moving into a software development role is something that I would call a journeyman designer or a craftsman designer, and that is someone who has multiple design skills, but they also have research skills, but they also are unafraid to embrace the technology. Because kind of you need to understand the materials that you're working with in order to be a good designer, but you also need to have a good sense of empathy, and that empathy really comes from being able to talk to people and to listen to people. So scenario-based design It can certainly drive a design process. User research can drive a design process. Personas can drive a design process. It really depends on what the requirements are of what you're actually what you're trying to accomplish. Whether are you trying to accomplish a mobile design experience, a tablet design experience? Are you looking to do something that's very tightly specific and role-based? For example, a heads-down teleservice worker in a call center, or are you looking to do something that's more organic, such as what happens when I inject artificial intelligence into the UI, and what does that experience look like? Much harder to predict, much harder to control. You have to take a different approach to designing for that. So I'd say scenario-based design or other approaches to design are really they should be in the repertoire of any developer or any engineers or any designer's toolkit.
Hmm. This is sort of a side question that I didn't plan for, but when you're talking about the different designs that you designed for, I don't even know if I'm allowed to ask this question. Maybe
Don't worry, I'll let you know if you
uh,
are or not.
are you looking at virtual reality and heads-up displays and stuff like that?
Absolutely, we are. We actually have, and I work really closely with the team that does it. We have an emerging technologies organization, and I'd be happy to send you some information after this. The team is called the Apps Lab. They are the Oracle Applications User Experience Emerging Technology team, and they have an active blog. So if you actually want to read about some of the emerging technology that we're looking at, the stuff they're allowed to talk about is up there. But we are looking at virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, but also weak AI, not so much into strong AI, but much more weak AI, or something we call the smart dog approach. Also looking into big data to a certain extent, but much more interested in visualizations. Big data is great, but it's not great if you don't know how to use it. And let me think about the other areas. Those are really I would say probably those are the key R&D areas that I could talk about.
Okay. So how would you, assuming this is just a normal day, you're not talking to us here, how does your day begin, go through, and end, in sort of general terms?
Sure. Well, that's a really, boy, I'm trying to think about how the best way to answer that question.
Well, okay,
Let
let
me
let
talk
me
about it.
also ask
Go
the
ahead.
second question, which is related. When does your day start and when does it stop? And I'm only asking you this
Never.
question because I talked to you at 5:30 this morning.
Um, Boy, so working in IT, it's hard for me because the curse I have is that I love what I do. And because I love what I do, and I have been really proactive about designing a job that I really want to be engaged with and that I want to get up every day and do, it draws me back in. I really enjoy doing what I do, and I'm in a unique position that I actually get to use all three of my degrees all the time. So, that's a rare position to be in, and I'm really lucky. And so it draws me back in all the time. So in terms of a typical day, it's probably a little bit easier for me to talk about a typical week than a typical day. A typical week for me, I actually plan the Friday before. So before I leave the office on Friday, and sometimes over the weekend on Saturday and Sunday, I start to look at the week ahead. I'll always have a short list of kind of my top 5 buckets, and that is the most important things I think my team and our organization should be focused on. And I sort of filter and sort. There's a lot of stuff that gets thrown on my calendar, and it's usually, wall-to-wall calls from, as you know, Tom, from 5:30 a.m. sometimes to 5:30 p.m., sometimes into the wee hours of the evening if I'm dealing with different time zones like Singapore, India, or Sydney. And the thing that I'm looking for is that the right place for me to spending my time? Given that time is the most precious thing that I could possibly have, if I can make a choice between spending time with my kids or doing that thing, is that thing the right thing? And I want to make sure that it's worth my time to be on that call. So that's the first sort of filter that I do. And then I look at which bucket of infrastructure support that it provides. Is it moving our strategy forward? So if I look at that meeting, is that a meeting that's actually materially going to move the strategy forward, or is someone just meeting to meet? Right? Are we going to get together and chit chat again? Is it something that could be handled in email? Or is it something that I can give to someone else on my team who can move it forward faster than I can because I'm starting to become a blocking obstacle to progress? Sometimes I do need to be there because my presence is required to help provide a different perspective. There is something to be said for having, 17 years under my belt at Oracle. It brings a lot of weight to a conversation, especially when we're interacting with a lot of new teams. Oracle's a really big company, over 100,000 employees. And being able to speak with organizational memory brings a lot of strength to a conversation. The next thing I'll look at is where I'm organizing my team's time. So I find that you cannot rinse and repeat any one message enough. And even though I say it all the time to my peers and my colleagues and to my boss, I have to remind myself. So I actually spend a good chunk of my time every week walking back around, reminding everyone what we're working on that week, why we're working on it, and how we need to move it forward in the weeks and months ahead. What's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? What are we driving to? And then I'll spend a bit of time in tactical meetings where we're reviewing designs. So I'm looking at design, and since I'm in communications and outreach, we have communication platforms, there's social platforms, there are websites that we use. And so I'll review designs, visual designs that are coming out of there. I'll also review a lot of writing in my role. I review a lot of the stories and the strategy pieces that come out of our team. Other tactical meetings for me are going to be customer meetings and sales meetings. I generally actually try to get more and more out of specific customer meetings because Oracle has people it pays a good chunk of money to actually do that for me, so it's not something I need to do. I spend more of my time talking to the sales organization and then helping them understand how to position the user experience strategy, how to position design as part of a conversation, and then how to up-level a conversation so that it doesn't get lost in engineering details, but it really focuses on the business value for the customer and how to kind of connect those dots. So I spend a lot of time doing that. And then in there, I try to interweave the odd phone call to the doctor, the dentist, getting my oil and filter changed, sorting out homework for small children. That happens around the edges of things, probably more than I would like. But that's pretty much a typical week for me.
How do you communicate with your team?
Good question. Lots of channels. I find that making sure that they are as well informed as possible is probably the single most important thing I can do. The second is actually making sure my peers and my peers' teams are actually as well informed as they can possibly be. And that's actually something new that I'm working on this year. For my own team, um, I have a weekly standing meeting where I talk about what I'm doing. So I have one-on-one meetings with my individual team members and their organizations. But I find that the best thing I can do is actually let them know how I'm spending my time, the problems that I'm working on, because when they see that, they have a very clear line of sight between how what they're working on matters and why it's important, and they don't lose focus and they don't lose momentum because they can see that I'm carrying forward a piece of their work and everything that I'm doing every week. So having that, in addition, I meet with, I have all of my team out to our headquarters here in Redwood Shores twice a year, where we get together and we have very active working meetings where we work through our planning for every 6 months and what do we need to adjust, what do we need to shift, how do we set the strategy. So we come together as a group. We'll do things like, go shoot bows and arrows or welding because those are the things I like to do. And so I get to request that. Although someone did ask if they could go see the new San Francisco Museum of Modern Art that just opened. And I said, okay, let's do that. So we communicate a lot by in person. In addition, most of my team is actually remote. They're not here at HQ. I myself and only one other person in my team actually come into HQ regularly. The rest of my team is globally distributed. So email, a lot of text messaging, WhatsApp for my folks who are international, and we use a web conferencing software. It's called Zoom, but it's the same class as GoToMeeting or WebEx, where you can flip a camera on and you can say hello and you can make eye contact and see folks face to face. That, and I take phone calls whenever anybody needs one.
So, in a regular day, what would you consider the most important tool that you use? And when I'm saying tool, I don't mean software, I don't mean hardware, I mean just what you consider a tool to get your work done.
That's an interesting question. You're gonna you love it or hate it, but I actually think the sticky note. So, and the reason my sticky notes are my most important tool is every week on Friday and Saturday when I'm kind of working out my plan for the week ahead. At home, I have my master lists. Everything that I actually want to accomplish, organized because I'm that kind of person, by work, by home, and I decide every week, what are the top 3 or 4 things that I make sure that I move forward this week. Maybe not accomplish, but move forward, that I need to make progress on. And I'll write them on a sticky note. And I leave those items on my laptop so that every time I'm in a meeting, every time I'm in a phone call, somebody's asking for something, an email, phone, whatever, I can glance down and remind myself, oh, this is the important stuff this week. This is not one of those things. I'm not going to worry about that because if I spend time on that, these are not going to move forward. So for me, being able to just keep focused on that on a weekly basis is probably the single most important, I would say, efficiency tool that I have.
Mhm. Okay. Now, as part of your job, where does writing, research, going to conferences, and presenting at conferences fit?
It's an interesting question. So, writing first. Writing is probably the single most important skill that someone in my role could possibly have, especially if you have a strategy aspect to your role at all, because you cannot write enough. You have to write again and again and again and again and again. And that's really the writing is about creating alignment, getting everybody singing the same song, pointed in the same direction, whether it's your own team, whether it's your organization, whether it's your peers, whether it's your peers' teams, whether it's executives that you're working with, whether it's customers, partners, words, 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 words. And so really being a clear communicator and a consistent quality communicator, probably the single most important thing you can do. Research for me really takes different forms. Research is what is the competition doing, and so attending broader industry conferences. I don't attend professional conferences so much anymore because I get there's more bang for my time to going to understanding what the competition is doing because I know those are the folks who are going to bring their A game in terms of where I really need to focus. I personally enjoy attending professional conferences, but I don't typically have the time to do it. So I focus much more on industry conferences. Presenting for me tends to take the form of communications with customers. So when I present, and this is where I sharpen my saw, is presenting to customers over and over again, presenting to partners over and over again, and presenting to our sales organization because I will constantly get feedback about is the story clear, does the story have a hole, is there a new angle that I have not considered that I need to start digesting, because I'll always get that kind of feedback at the end of a talk, and that for me is probably the best kind of research that I can do because it really helps them keep a pulse on the market.
Hmm. So when you present, are you talking about using PowerPoint, Keynote, one of those things?
Yeah, it really depends on the context, right? And also the size of the group. If it's a 6-person, 7-person sit down, sort of executive lunch, no, I'm not going to use PowerPoints. It doesn't make sense. That's not the kind of conversation those people want to have. They want a dialogue. They want it to be interactive. They want it to be thought-provoking. They want it to be challenging. So, that's much more, you bring maybe somewhat contrarian views and you engage in a really active conversation. If it is a large group, say 20 people and up, often I'll have PowerPoints, but the PowerPoints there are going to be for context. You can't jump into, in my profession, in user experience, you cannot jump into a conversation without explaining what user experience is. That's just the nature of the beast. You can't get away from it. And anytime I've tried, I lose my audience because they don't quite know where to start, and I need to help them find a way into the conversation, and the PowerPoints are what do that. It doesn't have to be a lot, 4 or 5 slides. The other thing I do is a lot of show and tell. So at the end of the day, Oracle sells products, and the result of all the storytelling I do has to be visible, and it has to be visible in the products. So I do a lot of demonstrations. But the storytelling that I do around the demonstrations isn't to get lost in the technical weeds of the capabilities. For that, you can have documentation, you can have YouTube videos. In person, people want to know, how do I connect with this? How do I connect with what you're showing me? Tell me a story about what you're showing me that helps me understand how my life is going to be better if I decide to take this on board. So those are really the things that I use when presenting.
Okay. So you've been at Oracle for 17 years. So what big changes have you seen in those 17 years? And what sort of changes do you think might happen in the near future, not the far future?
Interesting question. So I think the two biggest changes that hit IT in general, but also Oracle is a good reflection of it. First of all, was actually the internet. Um, Back in the dawn of time, when I was just coming out of school, when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, the internet was coming online, and things like HTML and Dreamweaver and Netscape. And that was probably the first biggest change for the industry, because up to then the industry had been secure, had been private, it had been about installing. There were private networks, but they were closed networks. It wasn't an open network. And I think that was the biggest change. That's the biggest cultural transformation I'd seen. But I think the next biggest one after that was really cloud computing and the notion of taking advantage of distributed infrastructure, distributed networks, because probably the single biggest thing that's done on the user experience side is it's required any kind of product experience to be simple to learn, easy to use, because it's now very easy for any customer to walk away from an experience that they don't like. If I don't like Amazon, I close the browser. If I don't like Oracle, I close the browser. It's just as simple. And and after a 1 year license, I can renew with a competitor. And so it's required companies to really transform how they approach enterprise software, and starting to really embrace things like design thinking, which is new. It's new it's new for IT, it's new for enterprises, it's new for a lot of customers. It's interesting seeing the regions of the world that are really starting to embrace it. We see a lot in Europe, and Middle East and Africa, where design thinking is really starting to lead the conversation. Other parts of the world are starting to come online as well, but that for us right now is really the hot spot. And so it's interesting to watch those transformations. I think the other thing the cloud has brought has been speed. The pace of change is fast. And what I didn't realize, I knew that Oracle was going to have to transform. I knew that our own teams would have to transform to be able to keep pace, because we couldn't just work harder. We'd just exhaust ourselves, right? That's not a way to live. But what surprised me, an unanticipated consequence, was the speed of change for our customers. They were not ready for how fast changes were going to be coming from software organizations. And so a lot of our conversation with customers about the cloud is, you really need to think about, getting someone from your organization whose job it is simply to just learn, whose job it is to stand there and drink from the information fire hose that's going to be coming at you, because it's not going to stop. The cadence is not going to slow down. The innovations are going to be continuous, the updates are going to be continuous, and you really have to have someone within your organization who is thinking about the future, and who is actively reading, actively digesting, actively consuming industry information, and helping a customer make sense of it. Sometimes customers themselves are too small to have that, and so they look to an outside partner to provide that sort of trusted advisor service. But I think in the cloud now, it's absolutely essential. I think otherwise you don't know what to do, and you drown. You get behind too fast. Your competitors, if they take on board the cloud model, they will move ahead of you faster than you can catch up.
Mm.
In terms of where I think things are going, I think it's interesting to me to see emerging technology, just the blossoming of the different platforms that are available today. A few years back, we didn't have Fitbits, we didn't have smartwatches, and now that's, industry standard gear. So to me, looking at that pace of change for a wearable technology is pretty interesting. I think it has a lot of interesting promise for enterprise as well. And it's interesting to watch how the use cases that are developing from that, as different organizations, different industries take on board things like heads-up displays. If they take on even virtual reality, to me fits in that space. I actually think augmented reality is more interesting than virtual reality. We find there's too much social resistance to wearing the headset, but wearing something that augments the work that you do today. Not so much the Google Glass style, but different kinds of augmented reality. It could even just be something on your smartphone that you hold up in proximity to something else. Those are pretty interesting. I also think there's a lot to be said for understanding where adaptive intelligence, AI, weak AI, where that's going to go in terms of enhancing user experiences for products, because that's a platform level upgrade that can be applied. And that's something that every product at an organization can benefit from. And it's one of those things that can kind of happen behind the scenes. It doesn't necessarily require a major investment in redesign, but it does require pretty major R&D. It's not something that can be bit off lightly and easily, because it requires a lot of thinking about how is this going to impact the people at the end of the day who have to use the application. How is it actually going to make their jobs better? Are they going to be able to understand how to take advantage of that? And that understanding requires time and thought.
Mm. Uh, what do you think is going to happen to employment in the future?
Hmm.
Well, I mean,
That is a hard. Yeah, that's a hard. That's a broad question. That's a hard one to answer.
yeah, I mean, when I'm older than you, so I come out of school, and the idea is, well, you're going to get a job, and you're going to work there for most of your life, and that's going to be it. And that hasn't proven true in my case. And I'm just wondering where you see employment going in the future.
I probably can't talk about employment trends specifically, but I can talk about what I think is required to be to stay employed in the future, because I think it really varies. For example, I didn't expect to be at Oracle for 17 years. I expected to be at Oracle for 18 months, but the work just kept being interesting. But if I reflect on my own trajectory, I think that what made the difference was number one, I didn't wait for someone to tell me what my job should be. I always tried to be a very proactive participant in shaping my own career and having conversations about that. How can I develop this interest that I have? How can I develop that interest? How can I make that a part of the work that I do? How can I pay attention to the business environment that I'm in so I can connect the dots between something that I love to do and a way for the business to make some money? Because if I can do that, that means I get to be paid for doing what I love.
Mhm.
And so I think number one, a characteristic, and I think this is true going forward, is very much being responsible for your career and not waiting for someone to tell you what to do. I think is absolutely essential. I think always learning. I think continuous education is pretty critical. I look at the pace of change in my own industry and even other industries, things like medicine, healthcare, manufacturing. Those are transforming pretty radically. So I don't think anyone can rest on their laurels. I think you have to be an active consumer of information so that when you start to feel your spider sense tingling that something is going to change, you pay attention to that and pay attention to your intuition and think, you know what, I'm hearing this word over and over and over again at work, and I really want, or I'm hearing it about it on the news, and I think it may have an impact on my industry. I wonder what that means. I'm just going to go get a magazine and read up on it and start to wrap my head around what it might mean for me.
Mhm.
I also think that being resilient is incredibly important. In my industry, it's easy to become demoralized in terms of how fast the business winds can change. One moment you're taking a victory lap, the next moment, all of a sudden you're behind the eight ball. So how do you deal with those kinds of swift changes? How do you deal with the sharp upturns and sharp downturns? You really have to have a high degree of personal resilience. And that's basic things like taking care of yourself, you know, good nutrition, a good night's sleep, a good sense of humor, not working too hard. Although I'm probably the poster child for not doing that. I'm probably the poster child for working a little bit too hard. But I really think that personal resilience is pretty necessary. Having colleagues that you can rely on to give you an outside perspective when you're in a tough spot, because what I see now, all I see are tough spots. But that may be because the pace of change is so fast. Now it's about constantly sort of assessing, thinking, strategizing, and then how do we put a strategy into execution mode so that we can see if it works or it doesn't work. And I do that pretty much constantly now, and that requires a lot of personal resilience on my part, to just keep pushing forward, keep pushing forward. I don't know if that answers your question, but those are the
No,
things
it
that I
more
see
it
is really
more than
important.
answers my question because
Okay.
it's also about one thing I didn't squeeze in there is, you have work and you have family, you have two children, how you keep it all in balance.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't even have an intense job, and I know that was a problem when I was younger, just keeping things in balance. So yeah, I
That is
definitely
a
think.
that's a fair question. The first answer is there's no such thing as balance. It's ridiculous to assume that you will, but I've resolved myself to that. And instead, the way I approach it is there are some days I'm a really good manager. There are some days I'm a really good mom. There are some days I'm a good designer. There are some days I'm a good writer. And I pick that one thing, and that's the thing that I try to do that day. It may mean that I'm a horrible parent that day because they're eating Cheetos for dinner, or chicken nuggets yet again, or it may be that that's the day that we take off as a family and we get to go do something together, and I disconnect my phone, I don't check my email, and I spend it with them. But I'm also that's the part about being proactive is and this is part of what I do when I sort my week on a daily basis, is I look at my week and I say, you know what, there's too much work pressure here, or I need more family time there, or I am pushing this piece too hard forward. I need to pull back a little bit. So for part of my assessing for each week is I look at very much at family time, because I consider that kind of sacrosanct. It's not time I'm going to give up, and so I look to make sure I make space for that in the right places and to the best of my ability. It's never perfect. And each week, it's very much, as any working parent can tell you, each week is an art, not a science for sure.
Hmm. So, for students who are, coming out of school and wanting to get in the industry, what do you think's most important, least important? Resumes, LinkedIn portfolios, contacts, internships?
Actually, I'm going to say all of the above. So let me tell you how I look at candidates right now. If someone is a writing candidate, or they're an engineering candidate, or they're a design candidate, I do look at them on LinkedIn because I want to see how they present themselves. Have they taken the time to develop a profile, even if it's a small profile? Just have they taken the time? Have they put a little bit of thought into what they want to say about themselves, and who they're trying, how they're trying to present themselves in the world? Because in my business, in the communications business, that matters. Have they done simple things, just like accurate information that's easy to read? And then I will always ask for a portfolio. Definitely ask for a resume because I like sitting with a resume and understanding who a candidate is. The cover letter is not a lost art, and it definitely should be written because it helps put something in context, right? It helps put the format of a resume in context of who that person is, what they're really interested in, and what they're hoping to accomplish. I like the online portfolio. I like taking a look at someone's work, even if it's under lock and key. I don't mind, typing in a password. If someone wants me to take a look at something that's behind a door, that's easy enough to do. So I actually think all those things are important.
Hmm, okay. Okay, Misha,
Oh,
we're
the other thing that I would add to that is be mindful of your social presence because when I am looking at a candidate, I will drop their name into Google and I see what comes back. And whatever search results get returned that fit within that candidate's profile, this is where it's actually helpful to have a candidate put a photograph on their LinkedIn profile because then I can make sure I'm actually looking at the right candidate. And that's where interesting things will come up. For example, conference presentations, stuff like that will pop up.
Mhm. Okay. Now, I promised you it would only be 30 minutes, and we're already over time on this particular thing. So, for anybody in the audience, if you have any questions, can you click the hands up indicator and I'll unmute you? Uh, Misha, are there any questions that you think I should have asked that I didn't?
I'm gonna have to ponder that, Tom. You're a tough interviewer. These are really good questions. Let me think about that for a second. I think the one other question that I would have thrown in there is, what do I think about working today in terms of working in a global workforce?
Hmm.
Um, I think it's incredibly imperative for anyone who is looking at going into a technology job to understand that they are going to have to cross paths with other cultures. And it's incredibly important to understand how powerful diversity can actually be for what you do. It's easy to become really siloed and think, I'm just going to do my one thing and live in my technology culture here, or in my particular geography. Here's the way we do things in Beijing, here's the way we do things in Amsterdam, here's the way we do things in Guadalajara, here's the way we do things in Austin, Texas. But to be successful in the IT industry, you will find some of your best inspiration comes from stepping outside of that comfort zone and traveling to another geography and understanding how they perceive technology, how they view technology culturally, because it can really vary. The rules of the road, the social requirements, how we navigate it. And that difference is what really sparks innovation. It's that difference that sparks new approaches, new ideas, new understandings. For me personally, I find it's the most refreshing thing I can do in my job is to get out of my office and go on the road and visit another part of the world. That is not what I do every day because I bring that experience back and it really informs how I think and it keeps me thinking broadly about my job.
So, if somebody has a resume and they actually have spent some time in another country, not necessarily for employment or anything, that type of thing would stand out if you were looking at a candidate. I mean, if you had a candidate
Absolutely.
Indiana, but also went to India, that would be some type of thing you would pop up.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll give you a good example. So I was recently hiring a candidate in Romania, and one of the things that popped out was that her family actually traveled quite a bit, and so she had grown up actually traveling through a lot of countries in Eastern Europe. And that came out on a resume. And for me, that was fantastic because I was looking for someone who had broad cultural experience in Eastern Europe who could kind of help us understand the lay of the land when trying to create events that were online events but would appeal to the local audience. And that only comes from someone who's actually had a chance to kind of even dip their toe in the water and understand that there is a difference, or who to go to, or that we should be mindful of the approach, things like that.
Mhm. Okay. Now, Misha, there are other people who are going to see this video. If they have questions, can I forward the questions to you? I'm not going to actually give them your email, but I would probably forward the question, then forward the answer
Yeah,
back to
I
them.
have no problem with that at all. I might be slow in responding, so you're going to have to nag me. But yes, happily. If they come to you, I have no problem with that.
Misha, I've been nagging you for almost 20 some years right now. So, okay. Hey, Misha, I really appreciate this interview, and I think this is going to benefit quite a number of students. Even if they weren't here today, they definitely will see this because I will be putting this interview in all my classes. And I'm sure you're going to be haunted by some of the questions over the years.
I know.
Okay, Misha,
Well, thanks very much,
if
Tom.
you
I
get
really
to
appreciate the
Bloomington,
opportunity.
dinner's on me.